The World Platform. Today I was just watching a Quantum of Consciousness video, and really I don't think he was talking about exactly what I was thinking about, but yet his words allowed me to have a thought based on his thought. And it brought me back to these rings, the Olympic rings as depicted, and especially in the opening ceremony for the Sochi Olympics. What we saw is rings on one side, and on the other, some sort of star or mass, and seeming to me like the mass that makes up the center of the ring. And perhaps this is the reason that all world nations agree that we cannot go to Antarctica, a place that seems to be reserved for the few. And I enjoy many channels that I don't necessarily agree with 100%, maybe only 50, maybe only 25, and yet valuable insight, based more on the energy and their demeanor and way of presenting, allowing room for others' thoughts to build upon, not being told things are this way or that way. And I'm automatically suspect when people get too excited, claiming they know, and we should prepare. And prepare for what? The end? The end that is inevitable in all of our lives. The end could be in a hospital bed, very sterile and unpleasant. In my opinion, nothing could be worse. Perhaps the best end would be quick, whatever it would be. But what I prefer is knowledge, and knowledge comes from everything if we are open and receptive, and there's no point in attacking others. Only allow information to build on your own understanding, which perhaps is one of the points of this existence. There's no need to convince anybody that you're right, or that your truth is their truth. We're only here having an experience. And with that said, welcome. And today we're going to have a little look at some history. I'm desperately in need of a vacation, and I've never been to Hawaii. This was suggested by Mark. And why am I using Wikipedia? Am I looking for absolute facts? No. I don't believe in the historical narrative, and I don't expect to find truth in the narrative, but I also believe that parts of the truth always exist within a lie, and from what we understand, we can take any piece of mainstream and now find the truth in it, or at least closer than what they would suggest we believe. So the history of Hawaii describes human settlements in the Hawaiian Islands. The history begins somewhere around 124 and 1120 AD, when the islands were first settled by Polynesians. Hawaiian civilization was isolated from the rest of the world for at least 500 years. Europeans, led by British explorer James Cook, arrived to Hawaii in 1778. Within 5 years after Cook's arrival, European military technology helped Kamehameha conquer and unify. Very interesting. Usually it's divide and conquer. But here, Captain Cook helps this man. Very interesting. Essentially, before Cook arrives, we have Polynesians. And here is our Polynesian in 1778, looking very colonial and not what we would expect. So, right off the get-go, what I'm talking about. For 500 years, these Polynesians are isolated, according to their story, from the rest of the world. Now Cook arrives, and here we go. Kamehameha the First also known as the Great, was the founder and first ruler of the Kingdom of Hawaii. So when I think about Hawaii, I imagine grass skirts and surfboards, and this man doesn't look like he's ever surfed. The kingdom was prosperous and important for its agriculture and strategic location in the Pacific. So here is pretty much game over. In the first two paragraphs, most people will read this and just read on. But to me, this is game over. You have Polynesians, isolated for 500 years. Captain Cook arrives in 1778, and then you have this guy in his colonial garb. And pretty soon, this is an agricultural and strategic location in the Pacific. Not what I'm sure these Polynesians had in mind. But let's read on. Almost immediately after Cook's arrival, led by Protestant missionaries, American immigration began. Americans set up plantations to grow sugar. Waves of permanent immigrants came from Japan, China, and the Philippines to work in the fields. The government of Japan organized and gave special protection to its people, who comprised of about 25% of the Hawaiian population by 1896. Okay, so 1896, 25% of the populace is Japanese, Chinese, and Philippine. Let's just have a little look at one of the original inhabitants, and really no picture of the Polynesians. And here we go. The native population succumbed to disease brought by the Europeans, smallpox, and they declined from 300,000 in the 1770s to about 24,000 in 1920. So here you go, 300,000 when Cook arrives, and by 1920, only 24,000 native population remain. A complete wipeout, just like we've seen with the Native Americans in North America. Same disease. And then America, within the kingdom government, rewrote the Constitution, curtailing the power of King David, Kalakua, and disenfranchising the rights of most native Hawaiians and Asian citizens to vote. So here's a look at King David. Kalakua was the last king and monarch of the Kingdom of Hawaii. And again, not the stereotypical Hawaiian image that pops into our mind, especially not an old Polynesian feel. In 1893, the Queen Lili Ukulani attempted to restore royal powers, but was placed under house arrest by businessmen with the help of the U.S. military. And here's a little look at native Hawaiians, the Aboriginal Polynesian people. This gave a sizable advantage to plantation owners. The government agreed on behalf of Hawaii to join the U.S. What government is left of the natives? In 1898, as the Territory of Hawaii. In 1959, the islands became the state of Hawaii of the United States. So really just chipping away and pretty much eroding the original native inhabitants of Hawaii. Just a complete reset and repopulating, done right in front of our eyes. And yet it goes further back than this. Because when we look at the architecture of Hawaii, for example, we see the same architecture that we see all over the world. And here's an example, and just as glorious as any of them, and clearly the same builders, the same people, and not Polynesians. And this island simply being repurposed, and the natives being the Polynesians, seeming to be perhaps survivors of the reset. The people inhabiting these lands in between this past civilization and ourselves. And when our own modern people get a hold of this realm, pretty much wiping out all native people all throughout this realm. And even here in Hawaii, the same story. But what's bizarre about this is that even during this pre-American, aided by a James Cook takeover, the kings and queens of Hawaii do not appear like the Polynesians that we would imagine. Again, this very colonial and southern feel. Very interesting. And here we can have a look at the Olani Palace shortly after construction. Ridiculous. This doesn't look freshly constructed. Perfectly manicured landscaping. But nevertheless, they tell us by the time David Kalakua assumed the throne, the original palace was in poor condition, suffering termite damage, and he ordered the old palace to be razed. I think the old one was this one here, of course, according to them. As far as the new palace, in 1879, 3 architects, Baker, Wall, and Moore, contributed to the design, and the cornerstone was laid. It was built of brick with concrete facing. Very interesting. And cost about $340,000. It rises 2 stories over a raised basement to 54 feet. The total height is about 140 feet. And it boasts a unique style known as American Florentine. Here another look in older times. And essentially the Corinthian. Always our giveaway of who we're really talking about here. And we can just keep going back. Here's 1863. Very interesting. Hawaii, not really what I expected. And yet I should have expected. Because it's exactly what is found all throughout this realm. And if you have anything lending to this research, please share it in the comments below. As always, I don't know, but I think together we can figure it out. And when I talk about, for instance, the Hawaiian reset, well, this is done by man, and the wiping out of the Polynesians, if we can even call them Polynesians, seeming to be a shifting of populations, something that is done after the Great Reset, and the Great Reset seeming to be beyond the abilities of man. Massive cataclysms that are experienced plain-wide, and the result of these cataclysms seems to be both mud flood and fire. And when I look at an image like this from the Ritz, as we examined in my last video, we see exactly this. And how are these fires started throughout our realm? How are these fires in California really started? And here, even though they tell us this was built without a permit in the 70s for the Ritz-Carlton and never was completed, we see signs of something else. And here remains of some steel. Here a column that is completely turned to stone, blending in with the sandstone. Not something that is known to occur in 30 years. And just seeming as if this whole realm is matter turned into stone through these reset cataclysms. And not only can we see this process, but we also see perhaps what caused the demise of this structure. And what I see here is what looks like some sort of great plasma discharge that has hit this point, melting, and here we can just see remains. And to lend to this matter, we see massive cratering around this blast point, and the complete destruction of these two columns that were in the line of fire and even dripping and re-solidifying, as seen here. And recently I was sent some information showing an application for a permit, an application submitted by the Ritz to build a retaining wall, completely covering all of this up. And here we can see this from 2004, a coastal development permit application. And it was really interesting. I'm going to try to somehow link this to you. But in summary, seeming like the 18th green being the topic of discussion, they wanted to build the coastal bluff, a new seawall, and fortunately it seems to have been shot down, and construction of the 18th green of the Half Moon Bay links began in 1972, including a concrete slab extending from the top edge of the bluff to the inland edge of the green. Portions of the bluff in the vicinity of the 18th green have eroded, slumped, and retreated. Bluff erosion gradually undermined the concrete slab beneath the 18th green, and by 1995 portions of the concrete slab were exposed and hanging over the beach. And a lot of good information in here. And I just received this less than an hour ago. I'll have to go through it and get back to you all. But for now, I thank you so much for joining me. And do have a blessed day. Please like, comment, and subscribe. And here, this was just sent to me by Let's Get Dirty Overlanding. He says it appears the demolition has been completed. Let's have a little look. And it really does appear so. I'm not really sure if this is the exact location, because it looks like apartments are right next door. But nevertheless, here's what we see. Just massive columns. These columns were even bigger than I'd originally thought. And we can just get a good look here. And it looks like they brought in this massive crane to tear everything apart. Here we go. And very disheartening. Not sure if there's anything left. It doesn't look like it. And just some massive columns. And I had a feeling we would have missed our window already. But there is plenty of evidence, and I believe that there's more locations like this just hiding under our noses in plain sight.